He bought an entire street overnight just because she gave him a piece of bread. The morning had not yet reached the edge of dawn when Clara Bennett pushed open the door of her tiny bakery, the bell above it giving a tired chime that echoed into the empty street. The air still held the bite of cold, the kind that settled into bones and stayed there. She wrapped her thin sweater tighter around herself and stepped inside, already knowing the ovens would take time to warm and longer to forgive her for turning them off too early the night before. Flour dust lingered in the air like a quiet ghost. The shelves were half empty. The register held barely enough to cover another day. She moved with practiced motions, measuring, kneading, shaping. Even as her mind counted debts she could not escape. Rent due in 5 days. Electricity overdue. The landlord had come twice this week, each time with a colder smile. And still, she baked, because it was the only thing she had left that felt like hers. The first batch slid into the oven just as a shadow passed across the frosted glass door. Clara frowned. No one came this early. Not anymore. Not since the new development down the street had swallowed half her customers. The handle turned slowly. The bell rang again, softer this time, almost hesitant. A man stepped inside. He wore a long, dark coat, damp at the edges as if he had walked through mist rather than rain. His presence changed the room. Not loudly, not suddenly, but enough that Clara felt it before she understood it. The warmth from the ovens seemed to retreat. The air grew still. He did not look around, did not speak. He simply stood there, as if waiting for something that had not yet arrived. Clara wiped her hands on her apron, forcing a small smile. Good morning. We are not fully open yet, but I can help you. The man turned his head slowly. His eyes were pale. Not blue, not gray, something colder. Something that did not belong to any warmth she knew. I do not have money, he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the room like a command that had forgotten it was one. Clara hesitated for only a moment. Then she reached behind her, picked up a loaf, still warm from the oven, and placed it gently into a paper bag. That is all right, she said softly. Everyone deserves to eat. She held it out to him. Their fingers brushed as he took it. Clara flinched. His skin was colder than the morning air, colder than the metal trays she had pulled from the freezer. For a second, neither of them moved. Then he looked at her. Not through her. Not past her. At her. As if he had just found something he had been searching for without knowing it. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you cannot miss. The man did not thank her. He did not eat. He simply held the bread in his hand, studying it like it was something fragile, something impossible. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out into the fading dark. Clara stood there, her heart beating a little faster than it should. Something about him lingered even after the door closed. The cold did not leave with him. It stayed, settled into the walls, into the quiet spaces between breaths. She shook her head, forcing herself back to work. Dough needed shaping. Orders needed filling. Life did not stop for strange men with empty pockets and colder eyes. But across the street, unseen behind tinted glass, a black car had been waiting. And inside it, men who had not moved for hours suddenly straightened, their attention locked on the bakery door. One of them spoke into a device, his voice low, controlled. He has found her. Silence followed. Then another voice answered, sharp with disbelief. That is not possible. The first man did not look away. It just happened. And somewhere far from that quiet street, in a place where shadows ruled and ancient power never slept, something stirred for the first time in centuries. By the time the sun finally rose, Clara Bennett had already sold 3 loaves and given away 1 more. The morning crowd was thinner than it used to be, but a few regulars still came in, drawn by habit more than anything else. A construction worker with tired eyes. An older woman who always paid in exact change. A young boy who pressed his face against the glass before his mother pulled him away, apologizing because they could not afford anything today. Clara smiled anyway. She always did. But something felt off. The warmth from the ovens no longer filled the room the way it should. It lingered near her hands, then slipped away into the corners like it was being watched. She caught herself glancing at the door more than once. Waiting. Not for a customer. For him. She shook her head and focused on kneading the next batch of dough, pressing her palms into it with steady rhythm. Flour coated her fingers, soft and familiar, grounding her in something real. The bell rang again. This time, It was not gentle. The door opened hard enough to strike the wall behind it. Clara looked up. Mr. Hargrove stepped inside, his polished shoes leaving wet marks on the worn tile. He did not belong to this street anymore, not really. Not since he had started buying properties one by one, turning them into something colder, something more profitable. His coat was expensive. His smile was not. "Clara," he said, glancing around like he was inspecting damage. "We need to talk." Clara wiped her hands slowly. "If this is about the rent, I told you I just need a few more days." He laughed, a short sound that did not reach his eyes. "Days are exactly what you do not have. Effective immediately, your rent is tripled. You either pay by the end of the week or you vacate." Clara stared at him. "That is not legal." "You signed the clause," he replied, already reaching into his coat to pull out a folded document. "Market adjustment. Perfectly legal." Her chest tightened. "I cannot pay that." "You know I cannot." "Then you close," he said simply. He turned slightly, as if the conversation had already ended. Outside, a child paused at the window again, watching the shelves with quiet hope. Clara followed his gaze. Something inside her shifted. She reached for a small roll from the tray and walked to the door, opening it just enough to hand it to the boy. "Here, take this." The boy hesitated, then smiled in a way that made the whole morning feel lighter. "Thank you," he said, his voice soft but bright. His mother looked embarrassed, but Clara only nodded. "It is all right." Mr. Hargrove watched the exchange with thinly veiled irritation. "Generosity is a luxury you cannot afford, Clara." She turned. Back to him, flowers still on her hands. "Maybe, but neither is cruelty." For a moment, the room fell quiet. Then he scoffed. "You have until Friday. After that, this place is mine." He walked out without another word, the bell ringing sharply behind him. Clara stood still, her hands trembling just slightly. She had known this was coming, but knowing did not make it easier. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and turned back toward the counter. That was when she noticed it. The paper bag from earlier. The one she had used for the man with the cold eyes. It sat on the edge of the counter, untouched, the bread still inside. Clara frowned and stepped closer. That was not possible. She had watched him leave with it. She was certain. Slowly, she reached out and opened the bag. The warmth was still there. Fresh, as if it had never left the oven. Her fingers brushed the crust. And again, that cold. Not outside her this time. Inside the room. Behind her. The bell did not ring. The door had not opened. But she was no longer alone. "You gave it away twice," the same quiet voice said. Clara turned. He stood there, exactly where he had been before. The same coat. The same stillness. But now, there was something else in his eyes. Not just cold. Not just distance. Recognition. Clara swallowed. "I thought you left." "I did," he replied. His gaze shifted to the bread in her hand. "Yet it returned to you." She did not understand. None of this made sense. But her heart was beating faster now, not from fear, not entirely. From something else. Something that felt like standing too close to the edge of a cliff and realizing the ground might not be where you thought it was. Outside, the black car engine started without a sound. Inside it, the man in the passenger seat lowered his phone slowly. "He has entered again without using the door," he said. The driver did not respond. He did not need to. Both of them were already watching the same thing. The bakery window, and the girl standing inside it, holding a piece of bread like it was the most important thing in the world. Clara did not step back. She should have. Every instinct told her that something about the man standing in her bakery was not right, not normal, not safe in any way she could explain. But she stayed where she was, her fingers still resting on the warm bread as if it anchored her to something real. "You said it returned to me," she whispered, her voice quieter than she intended. "That does not happen." The man tilted his head slightly, studying her with that same unreadable gaze. "Many things do not happen," he said, "yet here they are." His voice was calm, but there was weight behind it, like words that had been spoken across centuries and never once questioned. Clara swallowed, forcing herself to breathe evenly. The room felt smaller now, not physically, but as if the walls had leaned in just enough to listen. "You did not eat it," she said, glancing at the bread again. "It is still warm." He stepped closer, not fast, not threatening, but the distance between them closed in a way that made her heart beat harder with each inch. "I could not," he said. Clara frowned. Could not, or would not. A faint pause. Then, for the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not warmth. Not quite. But something less distant. I have not tasted anything in a very long time, he said. The words settled between them, heavier than they should have been. Clara did not understand what that meant, but she felt the truth of it. A strange sadness wrapped inside something far older than either of them. She looked at the bread in her hands, then back at him. Try it now, she said softly. It is fresh. He did not move, did not reach for it. Instead, his gaze dropped to her hands. Flour dusted her fingers, soft against skin that still held the warmth of the ovens. You touched it, he said. Clara blinked. Of course I did. I made it. Silence stretched for a moment. Then he reached out. Slowly, deliberately. His fingers brushed hers again as he took the bread. The cold was still there, sharp and unnatural, but this time it did not make her pull away. She held still, watching him, waiting. He lifted the bread slightly, as if testing its weight, its presence. Then, after a hesitation so small it almost did not exist, he broke off a piece. The sound was soft, crisp, real. He stared at it for a second longer. Then he brought it to his lips. Clara held her breath. The moment he tasted it, everything changed. Not in a way she could see immediately. Not like a sudden movement or a dramatic shift. It was quieter than that. The air stilled. The faint hum of the refrigerator in the corner seemed to disappear. Even the distant noise of the street faded, as if the world itself had paused. The man closed his eyes. Just for a second. But in that second, something ancient and buried stirred beneath the surface of his stillness. His hand tightened slightly around the bread. His shoulders, always perfectly controlled, lowered just enough to reveal the smallest fracture in that control. Clara felt it before she understood it. Like warmth spreading through a room that had been cold for too long. When he opened his eyes again, they were different. Not their color. Not exactly. But the way they looked at her. Less distant. More focused. As if she had become the center of something far larger than herself. What is your name? He asked. Clara hesitated. Then answered. Clara Bennett. He repeated it quietly, as if testing the shape of it. Clara. The way he said it made her name feel unfamiliar, like it carried meaning she had never noticed before. Outside, the black car doors opened in perfect silence. Two men stepped out, their movements precise, controlled, eyes fixed on the bakery. Inside the car, the man who had spoken earlier remained seated, his hand tightening around the phone. He ate it, he said under his breath. The driver turned slowly. That is not possible. Inside the bakery, Clara watched as the man took another bite. This time, there was no hesitation. No pause. Only certainty. You gave this away, he said, his voice lower now, quieter but somehow more powerful. Twice. Clara nodded slightly. It is just bread. He looked at her again. No, he said. It is not. The words carried something deeper than she could grasp. Something that made the air feel heavier, the silence sharper. And for the first time since he had walked into her life, Clara felt it clearly. This was not just a stranger. This was not just a man. And whatever he was, he had just crossed a line that could not be undone. Clara did not realize she had stepped closer until she felt the edge of the counter press lightly against her hip. The space between them had narrowed without her noticing, as if something unseen had drawn her forward inch by inch. The man stood still, the piece of bread still in his hand, but the air around him had changed again. It was no longer just cold. It was charged, like the moment before a storm breaks, when everything holds its breath. You said it is not just bread, Clara said, her voice steadier than she felt. Then what is it? He looked at the remaining piece in his hand, turning it slightly as if the answer might be hidden in its texture. For a long moment, he did not speak. When he finally did, his voice was quieter, but heavier. It is something I had lost. Clara frowned. Lost. It is just flour and water and yeast. A simple recipe. He shook his head once. No, not simple. Nothing that can reach me is simple. The words settled into the room like a truth that had been waiting too long to be spoken. Clara felt a strange chill run through her, not from the air, but from the meaning behind what he had said. Reach you? What does that even mean? Before she could ask, the bell above the door rang again, sharp and sudden. Both of them turned. Two men entered, dressed in dark suits that seemed too precise, too deliberate for the worn street outside. Their eyes scanned the room in a single sweep before settling on the man beside Clara. They did not speak immediately. They did not need to. The silence between them carried recognition, Hierarchy. Something unspoken but absolute. Sir, one of them said at last, his tone controlled but tight beneath the surface. We have been searching. Clara glanced between them, confusion tightening in her chest. Searching for who? The man beside her did not answer right away. His gaze remained on Clara, as if the presence of the others had not changed what mattered in the room. You should not be here, the second man added, his voice lower, almost a warning. This place is not secure. Clara felt a flicker of irritation break through her unease. This is my bakery, she said, her chin lifting slightly. It is secure enough. The two men looked at her then, really. Looked at her, and something in their expressions shifted. Not dismissal. Not exactly. Something closer to surprise. As if they had expected someone else entirely. He spoke before they could respond. She gave it freely, he said. The words were simple, but the weight behind them silenced the room again. The first man straightened almost imperceptibly. Freely. Yes, the man repeated. Twice. Clara did not understand why that mattered. But clearly it did. The air between the three men tightened, invisible lines of power and protocol snapping into place. Sir, the first man said carefully, the council will need to be informed. At that, something in the man beside Clara shifted. Not visibly. Not in a way she could point to. But the temperature in the room dropped just enough to make her breath catch. No, he said. The word was soft. But absolute. The two men fell silent immediately. Clara felt it then. Not just tension. Not just authority. Something deeper. Something that made even the idea of arguing feel impossible. The man turned slightly, just enough to face them without fully turning away from her. No one is to be informed. Not yet. His tone did not rise. It did not need to. The command settled into the space like a law that had always existed. The men exchanged a brief glance, then nodded in unison. Understood. Clara looked at him, really looked this time. At the way the others deferred without question. At the way the room itself seemed to bend around his presence. You are not just someone passing through, she said quietly. It was not a question. He met her gaze. No. The answer was simple, honest, and somehow more unsettling because of it. Before she could press further, a noise from outside drew her attention. Engines. More than one. She turned her head slightly, catching a glimpse through the window. Dark vehicles lined the street now, silent and still, their presence too deliberate to ignore. The same street that had been quiet just an hour ago now felt watched from every angle. When she looked back at him, something inside her had shifted. The ground beneath her certainty was no longer steady. Who are you? She asked. This time, it was a question. He studied her for a moment, as if weighing something far beyond the words themselves. Then he stepped closer, just enough, that she could feel the cold again, sharper now, more real. His voice dropped, low enough that only she could hear it. Someone who does not forget a debt. Clara felt her breath catch. Debt. For bread. That is not how the world works, she said softly. His gaze did not waver. It is how my world works. And in that moment, Clara understood one thing with absolute clarity. Whatever world he belonged to, it had just collided with hers. And it was not going to leave quietly. Clara did not realize she had stopped breathing until the silence stretched too long to ignore. His world. The words echoed in her mind, heavy and impossible to place inside anything familiar. She should have stepped away. She should have laughed it off, told him he was being dramatic, that this was just a bakery on a failing street, and not the center of anything important. But she did not move, because something in his voice had not sounded like a metaphor. It had sounded like truth. Outside, the line of dark vehicles remained still, their presence pressing against the windows like a shadow that refused to pass. People on the street had begun to notice. A man slowed his walk. A woman paused with her grocery bag. The air carried a quiet tension, the kind that made strangers lower their voices without knowing why. Inside, Clara folded her arms slightly, more to steady herself than to create distance. You talk like everything has rules I do not understand, she said. Debts. Worlds. People do not buy entire streets over bread. His gaze held hers, steady and unblinking. No, most people do not. The answer was simple. Matter of fact. It did not try to convince her. It did not need to. One of the men behind him shifted his weight, then stepped forward just enough to speak without interrupting. Sir, arrangements have already begun. The paperwork will be completed before sunset. Clara turned sharply. Paperwork? For what? The man hesitated for a fraction of a second, then looked to the one standing beside her. The entire block, he said carefully. Every property. Clara stared at him, certain she had misheard. That is not possible. He did not look away. It is already done. Her pulse quickened. That kind of money, that kind of power, it did not belong anywhere near her. Life. It did not belong in this room. She turned back to the man with the cold eyes. You cannot just do that. People live here. Businesses. Families. This is not yours to take. Something shifted again. Not anger. Not offense. Something quieter. He stepped closer, his voice lowering. I am not taking it, Clara. I am removing what threatens you. The words landed harder than anything else he had said. For a moment, she could not respond. Removing what threatens you. As if her problems were something that could simply be erased. As if the world bent that easily for him. Mr. Hargrove owns most of this street, she said, her voice tight. He is the one raising the rent. He is the one forcing people out. He is the threat. A faint pause. Then, for the first time, something almost like understanding crossed his expression. Yes, he said quietly. He is. Outside, one of the black vehicles pulled forward slightly, stopping in front of the building across the street. A man stepped out, holding a folder, his movements precise and efficient. Clara watched through the window as he approached the door of Mr. Hargrove's office without hesitation. Her stomach dropped. You already knew, she said. Not a question, a realization. He did not deny it. I know everything that touches what is mine, he said. Clara felt something twist in her chest. What is mine? The phrase should have angered her. It should have made her push back, reject the implication entirely. But instead, it left her unsettled in a way she could not explain. I am not yours, she said, more sharply than before. His gaze did not change. No. The answer came without hesitation. You are not. And yet, he added after a moment, you gave without expecting anything in return. That creates a bond. Clara shook her head, stepping back now, finally breaking that invisible line between them. It was just bread. It was kindness. That is all. He watched her carefully, as if measuring every word she said. Kindness is never just anything, he replied. Not in my world. The bell above the door rang again, but this time no one entered. Instead, voices rose outside. Raised. Confused. Clara turned toward the window just in time to see Mr. Hargrove being stopped mid-stride by the man with the folder. Papers were presented. Words. Exchanged. The color drained from Mr. Hargrove's face as he read. His posture shifted, confidence cracking into something far less certain. Clara felt her breath catch. This was happening. Not slowly. Not over time. But now. In front of her. She turned back, her voice barely above a whisper. What did you do? He looked at her, that same calm, unshaken presence filling the room. I honored a debt, he said. Outside, Mr. Hargrove lowered the papers, his hand trembling slightly as he looked toward the bakery. Toward her. And for the first time since she had known him, the man who had controlled her future looked uncertain. Mr. Hargrove did not come back inside. He stood on the sidewalk, frozen in place, the papers still in his hand as if they had turned heavier than he could hold. The man in the dark suit spoke to him again, calm and precise, pointing to a signature line that had already been filled. Clara could not hear the words, but she could see the shift. The control Mr. Hargrove had carried for years was gone. Not cracked. Gone. People had started to gather now, drawn by the quiet disruption. Neighbors stepped out of their shops. A woman from the laundromat. The owner of the corner deli. They all watched as something they did not understand unfolded in front of them. Clara turned slowly back toward the man in her bakery. You did this in minutes, she said, her voice low, almost disbelieving. Not minutes, he replied. It only appears that way. His gaze drifted briefly toward the window, then returned to her. It was decided the moment you offered me that bread. Clara shook her head, a faint, almost helpless laugh escaping her. That does not make sense. Nothing about this makes sense. He studied her quietly. It does not have to make sense to you. It only has to be true. The simplicity of the statement unsettled her more than anything else, because it left no room to argue. Outside, Mr. Hargrove finally moved. He lowered the papers slowly, his eyes lifting toward the bakery window again. This time, there was no irritation in his expression, no superiority, only something uncertain, something closer to fear. He took a step forward, then another, as if pulled by something he could not ignore. Clara saw him approaching and felt her chest tighten. "He is coming back," she said. The two men in suits shifted slightly, their attention sharpening, but the man beside her did not move. "Let him," he said. The door opened again, slower this time. The bell rang, but it sounded different now. Quieter. Mr. Hargrove stepped inside, his posture no longer rigid, his confidence stripped down to something far more human. "Clara," he began, but the words faltered as his gaze flicked toward the man standing beside her. Recognition hit him like a physical force. Clara saw it happen in real time. The slight widening of his eyes. The way his shoulders dropped just a fraction. The instinctive shift from dominance to something else entirely. Respect. Or fear. Perhaps both. "Sir," Mr. Hargrove said, his voice suddenly careful, measured in a way she had never heard before. "I was not aware." The man did not respond immediately. He simply looked at him, that same quiet stillness pressing into the room like gravity. "You raised her rent," he said at last. The words were not loud, but they carried weight that made the air feel heavier. Mr. Hargrove swallowed. It was standard adjustment. Market conditions. It will be reversed. Immediately. Clara blinked. Reversed. Just like that. He nodded quickly, almost too quickly. "In fact, I will lower it. Below previous terms. Consider it a gesture of goodwill." The words sounded rehearsed, but the tension in his voice betrayed him. He was not offering. He was correcting. The man beside Clara stepped forward, closing the distance just enough to make Mr. Hargrove instinctively step back. "Goodwill is not required," he said quietly. "Fairness is." Mr. Hargrove nodded again, his grip tightening on the papers. "Of course. Fairness." Clara watched the exchange, her mind struggling to keep up. This was the same man who had threatened her hours ago. The same man who had dismissed her without hesitation. And now he stood in her bakery, adjusting his tone, his posture, his entire presence around someone who had not raised his voice once. "You will leave her business untouched," the man continued. "No further increases. No pressure. No interference." Mr. Hargrove did not hesitate. "Yes, of course. It is already written into the new agreement." Clara felt a strange mix of relief and disbelief settle in her chest. This was what she had wanted, what she had needed, but not like this. Never. Like this. The man turned slightly, his attention returning to her. The moment he did, the pressure in the room shifted again. Softer. Focused. As if everything else had been dealt with and no longer mattered. "Is this acceptable to you, Clara?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. She had expected decisions. Commands. Not this. Not him asking her. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes, I think so." Mr. Hargrove exhaled quietly, as if released from something he had been holding since he stepped inside. "Then we are finished here," the man said. Mr. Hargrove did not argue. He nodded once more, then back toward the door, leaving the bakery without another word. The bell rang again. And just like that, he was gone. Silence returned, but it was not the same silence as before. It felt different now. Heavier. Fuller. Clara looked at the man standing in her bakery, the one who had just reshaped her future without raising his voice, without even seeming to try. "You did not have to do that," she said quietly. His gaze met hers. "Yes," he replied. "I did." And for the first time, Clara understood that whatever he was, whatever world he came from, he did not see this as a favor. He saw it as something owed, something inevitable. And that made it far more dangerous than she had realized. The silence after Mr. Hargrove left did not feel like relief. It felt like the aftermath of something Clara could not yet name. The air was still heavy, but not with fear anymore. With something deeper. Something that pressed against her thoughts and refused to let them settle. She stood behind the counter, her hands resting on the worn wood, trying to ground herself in something familiar. But even the counter felt different now, as if it belonged to a different version of her life. "You should go," she said quietly, not looking at him at first. Her voice was calm, but there was tension beneath it. Not anger. Not fear. Something closer to caution. He did not move. His presence remained exactly where it had been, as steady and immovable as before. "Do you want me to go?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. She looked up at him, meeting his gaze fully this time. It was not cold in the same way anymore. Still distant. Still powerful. But there was something else now. Something that made her hesitate. "I do not know what I want," she admitted. That is the problem. He seemed to consider that, his expression unreadable but not dismissive. That is an honest answer, he said. Clara exhaled slowly. Honesty felt like the only thing she still had control over. Everything else had shifted too quickly. You said you do not forget a debt, she continued. That this is how your world works. But my world does not work like that. People help each other because it is the right thing to do, not because they expect something in return. His gaze held hers, steady and unwavering. I did not say I expect something in return, he replied. I said I do not forget. There is a difference. Clara frowned slightly, trying to understand. It feels the same. It is not. His voice was softer now, but no less certain. Expectation demands. Memory chooses. The distinction settled between them, subtle but important. Clara felt it, even if she could not fully explain why. Outside, the street had begun to change. The gathered crowd had thinned, but not disappeared. People lingered longer than they should have, casting glances toward the bakery as if something inside it had altered the rhythm of the entire block. The black vehicles remained, silent and watchful, their presence no longer hidden. Clara noticed it now in full. The way no one approached them. The way space seemed to form around them without anyone consciously deciding to step back. This is not normal, she said quietly. He followed her gaze toward the window, then back to her. No, he agreed. It is not. She let out a small breath that almost turned into a laugh. At least we agree on something. For a moment, something close to amusement touched his expression. Brief. Fleeting. Gone before she could be sure it had been there at all. Then the two men who had entered earlier stepped forward again, more carefully this time. Sir, one of them said, his tone respectful but edged with urgency. The council is already asking questions. They have noticed the transfers. The movement. They will not remain patient. Clara stiffened slightly at the word council. It sounded official, structured, dangerous in a way she could not define. He did not look at them immediately. His attention remained on her, as if their words existed at the edge of something more important. Let them ask, he said at last. His tone did not change, but the effect on the two men was immediate. They fell silent again, their concern unspoken but visible in the way they exchanged a brief glance. Clara watched this, the pattern becoming clearer with every passing moment. People like them did not speak over him. They did not challenge him. They adapted around him. Who are they? She asked quietly. He turned back to her. Those who serve. The answer was simple. Too simple. Serve you, she pressed. A faint pause. Then yes. The confirmation landed heavily. Clara felt it settle into place with everything else she had seen. The cars. The men. The way Mr. Hargrove had changed the moment he recognized him. The way the air itself seemed to shift when he spoke. You are not just someone with money, she said slowly. It was not a question anymore. He held her gaze. No. Then what are you? The question hung between them, fragile and dangerous. For a moment, he did not answer. The silence stretched, thick with something unspoken. Then, slowly, he stepped closer again. Not enough to invade her space, but enough that she could feel the cold return, sharper now, more defined. When he spoke, his voice was low, not threatening, not dramatic, just true. I am the reason they did not question you when you gave me that bread. Clara felt her breath catch. The meaning slipped through her understanding for a second before settling into place. Her eyes widened slightly, the pieces finally beginning to connect in a way she could not ignore anymore. The men outside, the fear, the obedience, the impossible speed of everything that had happened. You are someone they fear, she said. He did not deny it. Yes, the word was quiet, but it carried more weight than anything else he had said. Clara stood there, her heart beating faster, her world shifting again beneath her feet. Because fear on that level did not come from wealth. It did not come from influence alone. It came from something older, something deeper, something that did not belong in a small bakery on a quiet street. And yet, here he was, standing in front of her, looking at her as if she mattered in a way no one else ever had. Clara did not speak right away. The word fear lingered in her mind, echoing louder than it should have. She had seen fear before. In overdue notices. In empty wallets. In the way people avoided eye contact when they could not pay. But this was different. This was something deeper. Something that bent people before a single word was spoken. She looked at him again, more carefully this time. At the stillness in his posture. At the way even his silence seemed deliberate. At the cold that was no longer just temperature, but presence. If they fear you, she said slowly, then why are you here? It was a simple question, but it carried weight, because nothing about him suggested he belonged in a place like this. A small bakery on a struggling street. He held her gaze, and for a moment, the answer did not come. Not because he did not have one, but because he was choosing how much of it to give. Because you gave, he said at last. Clara exhaled quietly, almost frustrated. That again. You keep saying that like it explains everything. It does. The certainty in his voice made it difficult to argue, even when she wanted to. Outside, the movement on the street shifted again. More people had stopped, not openly staring, but watching in the way people do when they sense something unusual and cannot look away. A delivery truck slowed as it passed. The driver glanced toward the line of black vehicles, then drove on a little faster than before. The world was reacting, even if it did not understand why. Inside, Clara moved behind the counter again, more out of instinct than intention. She needed something solid between them, something normal. She reached for a cloth and began wiping the surface, even though it was already clean. You said there is a difference between expecting and remembering, she said. That you do not demand anything from me. His eyes followed her movements. Yes. Then why does it feel like everything just changed? She asked. Like I do not get to decide what happens next. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer to the counter, resting his hand lightly against the edge. The wood beneath his fingers seemed almost too fragile for the weight of his presence. Because something did change, he said. Quietly. Not because I forced it, but because you created it. Clara stopped wiping. The cloth stilled in her hand. Created what? A connection. The word was simple, but it carried something deeper. Something that settled into her chest in a way she did not like. I did not ask for that, she said. No, you did not. His agreement came without hesitation. But that does not make it any less real. Before she could respond, the man who had spoken earlier stepped forward again, this time more urgent. Sir, the council has issued a formal inquiry. They are requesting your presence. Immediately, Clara felt the tension rise again, sharper this time. The word request did not sound like a request. It sounded like something else. Something closer to a demand wrapped in politeness. He did not turn toward them. Not fully. His attention remained split, but clearly anchored to her. Tell them I am occupied, he said. The man hesitated. That will not satisfy them. His gaze shifted then. Not quickly, not violently, but with enough weight that the man speaking fell silent before the look had fully landed. It does not need to satisfy them, he replied. It only needs to be understood. The finality in his tone left no room for argument. The man lowered his head slightly. Understood. Clara watched this exchange, the pattern repeating itself. Authority without effort. Control without force. It was not loud. It was not aggressive. It simply existed. And everyone else adjusted around it. She set the cloth down slowly. Whoever this council is, she said, they sound important. They are. The answer came easily. And they are asking for you. Yes. She held his gaze. Then maybe you should go. The words came out more firmly than she expected. Because whatever this was, whatever he was, it did not belong here. Not fully. Not safely. He studied her for a long moment. Not offended. Not surprised. Just considering. You want me to leave? He said. It was not the same question as before. There was something else behind it now. Something more personal. Clara hesitated. Then nodded once. I think it would be better. Silence followed. Not tense. Not immediate. Just heavy. Then he straightened slightly, his hand lifting from the counter. As you wish, he said. The words were simple. But the moment they left his mouth, something shifted. Again. Outside, the line of black vehicles adjusted in perfect unison. Doors opened. Engines started without sound. The street responded as if it had been waiting for this signal all along. Clara felt it in her chest, a strange mix of relief and something she could not name. He turned toward the door, his movement smooth, controlled. Then he paused, just before reaching it. Without turning back, he spoke again. This does not end because I leave, Clara. Her breath caught. What does that mean? He did not answer directly. Not yet. Instead, he reached for the door. The bell rang softly as it opened. And for the first time since he had entered her life, he stepped outside on his own terms. But the cold did not leave with him. It lingered. In the air. In the walls. In the quiet space he left behind. And Clara knew, with a certainty she could not explain, that whatever had started between them was far from over. The door closed behind him, and for a moment, the entire bakery felt hollow, as if something essential had been removed too quickly for the space to adjust. Clara stood where she was, her eyes fixed on the door long after the bell stopped ringing. The cold remained, not sharp like before, but woven into the air, lingering in a way that made it impossible to ignore. She let out a slow breath and forced herself to move. Dough still waited on the counter. Orders still needed to be filled. Life did not pause just because something impossible had stepped into it. She turned back to her work, her hands moving out of habit, kneading, folding, shaping. But her mind refused to settle. His words echoed again. "This does not end because I leave." She pressed her palms into the dough harder than necessary, as if she could push the thought away. "It is over," she whispered under her breath. "It has to be." The bell rang again. Clara froze for a split second before looking up. But it was not him. It was Mrs. Alvarez from the laundromat, her eyes wide with curiosity she was trying very hard to hide. "Clara, what is going on outside?" she asked, stepping in cautiously. "There are men everywhere. Expensive cars. People are saying the whole block just got sold." Clara forced a small smile. "It is. Just business. Nothing to worry about." Mrs. Alvarez did not look convinced, but she nodded slowly, accepting the answer she was given. "Well, whatever it is, I hope it is good news for you," she said, glancing around the bakery. "You deserve a break." Clara nodded, but the word break felt strange now, like something from a life she no longer fully recognized. The morning passed in fragments after that. Customers came and went, but each one carried the same quiet question in their eyes. What happened here? Clara answered none of them. She kept her head down, her hands busy, her voice steady. But underneath it all, something had shifted. Not just outside on the street. Inside her as well. By early afternoon, the black vehicles were gone. The street had returned to something that looked normal. Shops reopened. People resumed their routines. But it was not the same. It could not be. Because everyone had seen it. Felt it. And even if they could not explain it, they knew something had changed. Clara closed the bakery for a short break, something she rarely allowed herself. She stepped outside, the cool air brushing against her face. The building across the street now had a small sign posted in the window, under new ownership. She stared at it, her chest tightening slightly. It was real. All of it. Not a misunderstanding. Not an exaggeration. Real. She walked slowly down the sidewalk, her steps measured, her thoughts louder than the city around her. "This is not normal," she said again, but this time there was no one there to hear it. She reached the corner and stopped, looking down the street that had been hers for so long. It looked the same, but it felt different, as if it no longer belonged to the same world she did. "You are thinking too small." The voice came from behind her. Clara turned sharply, her breath catching before she could stop it. He stood a few feet away, as if he had always been there, as if distance meant nothing at all. "You left," she said, the words coming out faster than she intended. "I did. Then why are you here?" His gaze softened slightly, though the weight behind it remained unchanged. "Because you are still here." The answer was simple, direct, and somehow more unsettling than anything else he had said. Clara shook her head, a mix of frustration and disbelief rising again. "That is not an answer. It is the only one that matters." He stepped closer, not enough to invade her space, but enough to make the world around them feel smaller again. The street noise seemed to fade. The movement of people blurred into the background. Everything narrowed to this moment. "You told me to leave," he said. "I respected that. But leaving does not erase what has already begun." Clara felt her pulse quicken. "Begun what?" He held her gaze, steady and unyielding. "The bond you created when you chose to give without fear." The word bond settled heavily in her chest again. She had tried to dismiss it before, to reduce it to something simple. But standing here now, looking at him, feeling the way the world seemed to shift around his presence, she could not ignore it anymore. "I did not create anything," she said, though her voice was softer now. "I just helped someone who needed it." "And that," he replied, "is exactly why it matters." Silence followed. Not empty, not uncertain, just full of something she could not yet define. Clara looked at him, really looked this time, and for the first time, she stopped trying to fit him into something normal. Because he was not. And whatever he was, whatever world he came from, it had reached into hers and refused to let go. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the confusion and the fear, there was something else. Something quieter. Something dangerous. Something that felt like the beginning of a question she was not sure she wanted answered. Clara felt the weight of his words settle into something she could no longer ignore. The bond you created. It repeated in her mind, slower now, deeper, as if each time she heard it, it revealed something new. She crossed her arms lightly, not as a defense this time, but as if holding herself steady. Bonds are between people who agree to them, she said, not something that just appears because of a moment. His gaze remained on her, steady and patient. In your world, perhaps. In mine, such moments are never small. They are recognized, remembered, bound. The last word lingered longer than the others. Bound. Clara exhaled, her breath visible in the cool air that had not fully left her even outside. You keep saying your world like it is separate from mine, like it exists somewhere else. It does. The answer came without hesitation, without apology. She studied him, searching for something that would make it make sense. A sign of exaggeration, a hint of metaphor. But there was none. Only certainty. Then tell me, she said, her voice quieter now but stronger in intent. What are you really? The question did not startle him. It did not even seem unexpected. If anything, it felt like something he had been waiting for. He looked at her for a long moment, as if measuring not her words, but her readiness to hear the answer. Then he spoke. I am what your kind has always called a myth. Clara felt her breath catch, not because of the word itself, but because of the way he said it. Not dramatic, not distant, just real. Myth is another word for something people do not understand, she replied. Yes. He inclined his head slightly. And sometimes, it is also a word for something they fear. The echo of their earlier conversation returned, but now it carried more weight. More truth. Clara shook her head slightly, trying to keep her thoughts grounded. You expect me to believe that you are not human. I do not expect anything from you, he said. I simply tell you what is true. The simplicity of it disarmed her more than any elaborate explanation could have. She glanced down the street again, at the shops, the passing cars, the ordinary world continuing as if nothing had shifted. And yet, everything felt different. If you are not human, she said slowly, then what does that make me in all of this? His expression changed, just slightly. Not in power, not in control, but in something else. Something closer to recognition. You are the reason something impossible happened, he said. Clara frowned. The bread. Yes. You felt it. I saw it. That moment when you tasted it. Something changed. He did not deny it. It did. His voice lowered, quieter now, as if the truth itself carried weight. For centuries, nothing has held taste for me. Nothing has carried warmth. Nothing has reached beyond what I am. Clara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air. Centuries. The words settled heavily, refusing to be ignored. That is not possible, she said. But her voice lacked conviction now. Not when you are what I am. He took a small step closer, not enough to threaten, but enough to make the world narrow again. When you gave me that bread, something changed. Not just for a moment. Not just for the taste. Something deeper. Something tied to you. Clara felt her pulse quicken, her thoughts racing. Tied to me how? He studied her carefully, as if the answer mattered more than the question. That is what I intend to understand. The words were calm, but they carried purpose. Clara shook her head again, stepping back slightly this time. No, that is not something you just decide. I have a life. A bakery. People who depend on me. You cannot just turn me into part of whatever this is. His gaze did not waver. I am not turning you into anything, he said. I am revealing what already is. The distinction felt thin. Too thin. Clara looked at him, really looked this time, and saw something she had not allowed herself to see before. Not just power. Not just control. Something else. Something older. Something that carried time in a way she could not understand. If what you are saying is true, she said slowly, then this is bigger than me. Bigger than a bakery. Bigger than a piece of bread. Yes. The agreement came immediately. It is. Silence settled between them again. But this time, it was not empty. It was filled with something that had weight, direction, consequence. Clara felt it pressing against her, asking something she was not ready to answer. Then his voice came again, quieter now, but no less certain. There is something you need to know. The tone shifted, not in volume, but in importance. Clara stilled. What? He held her gaze, and for the first time, there was no distance in it. Only truth. This has happened before. Her breath caught. What do you mean? His eyes did not leave hers. Someone like you existed once. Long ago. Clara felt a cold that went deeper than anything she had felt before. And what happened to her? He did not answer immediately. The silence stretched, heavy with something unspoken. Then, quietly, he said, "She changed everything." And in that moment, Clara realized that whatever she had stepped into was not just beginning. It had already happened once before. And it had not ended quietly. Clara felt the words settle into her chest like a weight she could not shift. Someone like you existed once. Long ago. The street around them seemed to fade again, the ordinary sounds of the city dulling into something distant and unimportant. Her focus narrowed to him, to the quiet certainty in his voice, to the way he spoke of time as if it moved differently for him. "What do you mean she changed everything?" Clara asked, her voice lower now, more careful. He did not answer immediately. His gaze drifted past her for a moment, not unfocused, but distant in a way that suggested memory rather than distraction. When he spoke again, his voice carried something it had not before. Not just control, not just power, something closer to history. "She was human," he said. "Like you. Ordinary in every way that matters to your world. But not to mine." Clara felt her fingers tighten slightly at her sides. "That sounds exactly like what you said about me." "Yes." The agreement was immediate. "Because the pattern is the same." "The pattern." The word sent a quiet unease through her. She crossed her arms again, this time more deliberately. "I do not like the idea of being part of a pattern I do not understand." "You are not part of it yet," he said. "Not fully." The words did not comfort her. They made it worse. "What happened to her?" Clara pressed. "You said she changed everything. That does not sound like a small story." "It is not." His gaze returned to her, steady and direct. "For a long time, my kind believed that humans existed outside our world. Separate, fragile, temporary, useful only in ways that served us." Clara felt a flicker of irritation at that, but she did not interrupt. "But she changed that," he continued. "Not by force, not by power, by something far more dangerous." Clara already knew the answer before he said it. "Kindness," she whispered. His eyes sharpened slightly. "Yes." The word was quiet, but it carried weight. She gave without fear, without calculation. And in doing so, she created something my world had never accounted for. Clara felt her heartbeat pick up again. "A bond." "Yes, but not just any bond." His voice lowered further, as if the truth itself required restraint. "Something older than laws. Older than power. Something that could not be controlled once it began." Clara swallowed. "And what happened to her?" The question came out softer this time. Not because she was less curious. Because she already felt the answer might not be something she wanted to hear. He held her gaze, and for the first time, there was no distance left in it. Only truth. She became the center of a conflict that nearly destroyed everything. Clara felt the air leave her lungs slowly. Conflict. Between who? His expression hardened slightly, not in anger, but in something colder. Between those who believed she should be protected, and those who believed she should be eliminated. The word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Clara felt a chill run through her that had nothing to do with the cold around him. Eliminated. Because of what she was. Because of what she represented. A weakness. Or a threat. Depending on who you asked. Clara shook her head slightly, trying to push back against the direction this was going. "That is not happening to me. I am not part of your world. I did not ask for any of this." His gaze did not waver. Neither did she. The words were simple, but they carried a truth that made her chest tighten. Outside, a car passed slowly, its movement almost too normal for the moment they were in. Clara became aware again of where they were standing. On a sidewalk, in the middle of a city that continued to move forward without noticing the shift that had just taken place. She took a small step back, needing space, needing distance. "If what you are saying is true," she said, "then I should stay as far away from you as possible." His expression did not change. "That would be the logical choice. But you are still here," she said. It was not a challenge. It was an observation. Yes, he did not deny it. Because logic is not what created this. Silence followed, heavier than before. Clara felt it pressing against her, forcing her to acknowledge something she did not want to accept. That this was already beyond logic. Beyond choice. Beyond simple explanations. "If this happened before," she said slowly, "then how did it end?" His gaze shifted slightly, not away, but deeper, as if the answer existed somewhere beneath the surface. It did not. in the way anyone expected. That was not an answer. That was a warning. Clara felt it immediately. What does that mean? He looked at her, and for the first time, there was something in his expression that resembled restraint, as if he was choosing not to say more. It means that once something like this begins, it does not return to what it was before. The words settled into her chest with quiet certainty. No return. No undoing. Clara looked at him, really looked this time, and understood something she had been avoiding since the moment he walked into her bakery. This was not a moment. Not a coincidence. Not something she could step away from and forget. It was a turning point. And whether she accepted it or not, it had already begun. Clara did not move for a long time after he finished speaking. The city had returned to its normal rhythm around them, but it felt distant now, like something happening behind glass. Cars passed. People talked. A door slammed somewhere down the block. But none of it reached her the way it should. Her world had shifted too far, too fast, and there was no clear place to stand anymore. Once something like this begins, it does not return to what it was before. His words echoed again, steady and unyielding. Clara drew in a slow breath, trying to steady herself. Then she turned and walked back toward her bakery without another word. She did not ask him to follow. She did not need to. The sound of his footsteps did not reach her ears, but she knew he was there. She felt it. The door opened, the bell chiming softly, and she stepped inside. The warmth of the ovens greeted her again, familiar and grounding, but even that felt different now, as if it belonged to a version of her life that was already slipping away. She moved behind the counter, her hands instinctively reaching for the dough she had left earlier. It had risen perfectly, soft, ready, waiting, just like everything else. You said she changed everything, Clara said quietly, her back still turned to him. That there was no going back. Yes. His voice followed her into the room, calm and certain. Then tell me something else, she continued, her fingers pressing lightly into the dough. Did she regret it? There was a pause. Not long, but long enough to matter. When he answered, his voice carried something she had not heard before. Not power, not control, something closer to memory. No, he said. Clara stopped moving. Her hands stilled against the dough, her breath catching slightly. She turned slowly, facing him again, even knowing what it cost her. Yes. The answer did not waver. Clara searched his face, looking for hesitation, for doubt, for anything that would soften the weight of what he was saying. There was none. Why, she asked. The word came out softer than she intended. Because what she created mattered more than what she lost. Clara felt that settle somewhere deep inside her, in a place she could not easily ignore. Matter. Loss. The balance between them. It was not something she had ever thought about like this before. Her life had always been simple. Work hard. Get by. Help when you can. Survive. But now, that simplicity felt fragile, like something that could break under the weight of everything he was describing. I did not choose any of this, she said after a moment. Her voice was steady, but there was tension beneath it. I did not ask to be part of some story that started before I was even born. He stepped closer, not enough to overwhelm her, but enough that she could feel the shift again. The cold. The presence. You chose when you gave, he said. Clara shook her head immediately. That was not a choice. That was just the right thing to do. His gaze held hers. And that is exactly why it matters. The words landed harder than she expected, because they left her with no argument. No way to dismiss what had happened as something small. She turned away again, needing space, needing something to hold onto that was not him. Her eyes landed on the rows of bread cooling on the racks. Simple. Ordinary. Real. She walked toward them, her fingers brushing lightly against one of the loaves. This is all I know, she said quietly. This is my world. People come in. They buy bread. Sometimes they cannot afford it. Sometimes they can. That is it. That is enough for me. Behind her, his voice came again. It was enough. The past tense caught her attention immediately. She turned back sharply. His expression did not change. But the meaning was clear. The moment she gave, the moment he tasted, the moment everything shifted, the line between her world and his had already begun to blur. You keep saying things like that, she said, her voice rising slightly now, frustration breaking through. Like everything is already decided. Like I do not get a say in any of it. His gaze softened, just slightly. You do get a say, he said. Clara stilled. Then prove it. The challenge came before she could stop it. Silence followed. Not tense. Not immediate. Just heavy. Then he stepped forward one more time, closing the distance between them until she could feel the cold clearly again. If you tell me to leave, he said quietly, I will leave. Clara held his gaze, her heart beating faster. And it will end. The question hung there, fragile and dangerous. He did not look away. No. The answer came without hesitation. It will not end. Clara exhaled slowly, the truth of it settling into her, whether she wanted it to or not. Then what does my choice change? His voice lowered, softer now, but no less certain. It changes how this unfolds. The words lingered, heavy with meaning. Not if, not whether. How? Clara looked at him, really looked this time, and understood something she had been resisting since the beginning. This was not about stopping what had started. It was about what she would do now that it had. Her fingers curled slightly at her sides, grounding herself in the only thing she could still control. Then I choose not to be afraid, she said. The words came out steady, clear, and for the first time since everything had begun, fully her own. Something shifted in his expression. Not power, not control, something deeper. Recognition. Yes, he said quietly. That is exactly how it begins. Clara stood in the quiet warmth of her bakery, her words still hanging in the air between them. Then I choose not to be afraid. The moment she said it, something settled inside her. Not certainty, not comfort, but resolve. It was small, almost fragile, but it was hers. And it did not waver. He watched her closely, as if that single decision mattered more than everything that had come before. In his world, perhaps it did. Outside, the late afternoon light stretched across the street, casting long shadows through the windows. The block looked the same as it always had, but beneath it, something had shifted permanently. Ownership had changed. Power had moved. And Clara stood at the center of it without ever asking to be. You said before that something like this does not end the way anyone expects, she said quietly. His gaze remained steady. That is true. Then maybe it does not have to end the same way this time. The words were not defiant. They were deliberate. Chosen. He studied her for a long moment, and for the first time since he had entered her life, there was something in his expression that resembled uncertainty. Not weakness, not doubt, but the recognition that she was not following the path that had been laid out before her. You believe you can change it, he said. Clara shook her head slightly. No, I believe I can choose how I stand in it. The distinction was subtle, but it mattered. She was not trying to control something bigger than herself. She was refusing to be shaped by it without a voice. Silence followed, but it was not heavy this time. It was balanced. Equal. He took a slow step back, creating space between them for the first time since they had been inside the bakery together. That space felt different. Not like distance. Like respect. Then this is where we begin, he said. Not as a debt. Not as something owed. Clara felt something in her chest loosen slightly at that. Good, she replied. Because I do not want to owe you anything. His expression shifted again, just barely, the faintest trace of something warmer passing through it before it disappeared. You do not, he said. Outside, the street continued to move, but now it felt steadier. Less like something watching. More like something returning to its place. Clara turned slightly, glancing at the racks of bread behind her, the simple rhythm of her life still present, still real. This is where I stay, she said. I am not leaving this behind. He followed her gaze, then nodded once. I know. The answer came without hesitation, and something in it made her believe him. Not because of his power, not because of the way others reacted to him, but because he had not tried to take that choice from her. That mattered more than anything else. The bond. You keep talking about, she said after a moment, turning back to him. If it is real, then it does not control me. His eyes met hers. No, it does not. It connects. Clara let out a small breath, nodding once. Then that is something I can live with. The words felt like a line being drawn. Not to keep him out, but to define where she stood. He seemed to understand that without needing anything more. Good, he said quietly. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them was no longer tense. No longer uncertain. It was something else now. Something quieter. Something steady. Then he turned toward the door. Not because she asked. Not because he was forced. But because the moment had reached its natural end. The bell rang softly as he opened it. He paused briefly, his hand resting against the frame. Clara. She looked up. Yes. His gaze held hers, and for the first time, there was no distance at all. Only presence. You changed something that has not changed in centuries. The words were not a warning, not a burden. They were acknowledgement. Clara felt them settle into her, not as pressure, but as truth she could carry in her own way. Then maybe it was time, she said. He held her gaze for a moment longer. Then, quietly, he nodded. Then maybe it was. He stepped out into the fading light, the door closing gently behind him. This time, the cold went with him. The bakery felt warm again. Real again. Clara stood there for a moment, then turned back to her work. Dough waited. Bread needed shaping. Life continued. But it was not the same life as before, and she knew it never would be. Outside, the street belonged to someone else now. To him. But inside the bakery, nothing had been taken. Only something had been added. Something invisible. Something powerful. Something that would not control her, but would never truly leave. And as Clara Bennett returned to the quiet rhythm of her hands and the warmth of her ovens, she understood one thing clearly. Even the coldest kings could be changed. Not by power. Not by fear. But by something as simple and as unstoppable as kindness.